There are 4 distinct steps that we need to do to prepare for Python programming. First step is we need to install something called the Python interpreter. Now this is quite just simply Python software. That's all it is. All right, it's nothing fancier than that. Then we need to install something called Eclipse. Now Eclipse is something called an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. It's quite simply just a piece of software. It's a software application that we use to write code and create Python applications. Next thing we need to do is set up Eclipse. Now Eclipse does make writing software considerably easier, but there is a lot of options in it and it is easy enough to get lost in it. Next thing is we need to create Python projects because we want to make sure that the previous 3 steps worked correctly. The only way to make sure that everything is working correctly is to actually create a Python project. So our first step, install the Python interpreter. Now this is just quite simply that it'll recognize Python code as Python code and it will run it as a computer program. That's all a Python interpreter is. It's Python. Okay, so you install that from python.org. Like all these things, it's free. All right, so make sure you install it from this particular location. There will be other places will be advertising, paid options and all this sort of thing. Install it from here. This is the reputable place where to install it from. Install, it's very easy to install. It's just download it, double click. Now it is important to note where it's installed to. All right, so as you're installing it, make note of where it is installed, because when we're installing Eclipse, Eclipse needs to know where it's installed to. Now it usually is able to find it itself automatically, well semi-automatically. However, there is occasions when it's not able to find it. If you don't know where Python is installed to, then how are you going to fix Eclipse? Which brings us to our second step. Now our second step is we install Eclipse. Now what is Eclipse? Eclipse is something called an integrated development environment. There are many different integrated development environments out there. Another example would be NetBeans. Now we are going to be using Eclipse. The reason I'm using Eclipse is because the one I'm most familiar with. While we're doing this course, everything is going to be done in Eclipse. Do not use any other integrated development environment in your own time if you want to, but during this class you have to use this. Okay, so it's quite simply you go to the Eclipse downloads page, then you unzip it to wherever you're going to have your Eclipse. Now you don't install it as such, it's just files that's there on your machine, so that means you can have multiple versions of Eclipse. All right, now Eclipse as well, you can write code in Java, you can write code in PHP, in JavaScript, in C, in C#, in C++. Okay, so Eclipse can be used for all of those, but we're going to use Eclipse to write Python. Now, after you install Eclipse, the first thing you need to do is you need to create a folder where all your Python code is going to be saved. All right, it's going to be actually saved in a physical location. Yes, there is cloud solutions out there. You can save it to the cloud, but we're not going to do that now. We're just going to save it on your machine. Makes things easier. Okay, now the third step is we need to set up Eclipse. All right, because I said already, it's a fairly substantial piece of software. So the first thing we need to do is we need to run Eclipse, obviously enough. Then we need to pick the folder that we created in the previous step while we're installing Eclipse. And that is the folder where all our Python code is going to be saved from this point onwards. Then we need to configure something called a view. Now we want to use the Python view. When you use if you're developing for Java, if you're developing for PHP, if you're developing for C#, there is particular views for them. There's actually many different views in IDE. It's the way it physically looks when you're looking at it. All right. So to make sure that when I'm doing my lessons, doing my video lessons, doing my lectures, I want to make sure that everyone has the same screen as I have. So we need to make sure we all have the correct view. This is a step that's often overlooked, and it is an important step. Next thing we need to do, we need to configure Eclipse to use the Python interpreter. And now what that means is we're going to tell Eclipse that we're going to be developing in Python. So now usually it semi-automatically detects where the Python is installed. If it doesn't, you need to be able to go to the folder where it's installed. So I said in step 1, we need to know where Python is installed. Now, you usually don't. However, sometimes you do. All right. So, next step is we need to create Python projects. This is to make sure everything is working. Simple as that. So, first thing we need to do is we need to create the first Python project. Now, there's a couple of steps, additional steps you need to do when you're creating your first Python project. You will not have to do them after you create your first Python project. All right, so we do these additional steps. We create our first Python project. We run our code. We'll see something appearing on our screen. Now, it's only going to be a simple text message that's going to appear on your screen. All right. After we create our first Python project, we then create our second Python project to show you how easy it is to create Python projects from that point onwards. Now, what follows is a full video of how to do all those steps we've just explained there. To write Python code, we have to have Python installed on our machine. Now, it's actually something called the Python interpreter, but that doesn't make a difference. All we need to know is that we're installing Python on our machine. So we go to here and we type in Python download, which brings us to this page here. We can see this link. We click on this link. Now this brings us to the Python download page. Now, so we just click on the latest one here. Now at the time of recording this video, it's Python 3.8.5, but you can click whichever one is there. Doesn't make a difference. Click on here and we can see that it's now downloaded. So where is that downloaded? So we're going to show you where it's downloaded. In my case, it's going to be downloaded in my downloads folder. It's then just a matter of us double clicking on the actual Python executable. There's nothing difficult about this at all. Now, so this is an important step. We need to note where Python has been installed. Now we need to know this because our next step is going to be installing something called Eclipse. We need to know where our Python interpreter is installed. So take note of this location, okay? It might be different on your machine. That is where it is on my machine. You need to take note of where Python is going to be installed, okay? This is a very important step, the most important step of this. Okay, so now I'm installing it. I speeded up the process here, so it might be a small bit slower on your machine. I click on close, and now we can see where it has been installed. So we can see in my case here, it's in C users no life app data local programs. Okay, so that's the actual address. That's where it's installed on my machine. I stress the point, it might be different on your machine. Right, but you need to know where it is. So what is actually installed? You can see it here. This is the Python interpreter. If I double click on it, we will see that it brings us to the little Python mark there. That is your Python program. So our next step is we are going to download Eclipse. When we download Eclipse, we're going to run it. We're going to create a Python project, and then we're going to tell Eclipse that the interpreter that it's going to use is contained within this folder. So to download Eclipse, we quite simply type in here Eclipse downloads. Now this will bring us to the Eclipse downloads page where we're going to download the Eclipse IDE, which we're going to use to write our Python code. So the Google search brings us to Eclipse downloads. We click on the top one, which is the Eclipse downloads, the Eclipse Foundation. Just click on it there. So we are going to be downloading the 64-bit one, but here we click on download packages. Make sure you click on download packages. All right, now we can use any one of these Eclipses. All right, anyone will do. But the one we're going to use is going to be the Eclipse IDE for Java developers. All right, could be any of them. But this is just the one we're going to use because it's the one I find most useful. All right. So we're going to click on Eclipse IDE for Java developers, even though we're not developing for Java. So we click on 64-bit here because that's what we have. Nearly everyone has a 64-bit machine now. Then we click on the download button up here. You can now see that it's downloading here in the bottom of the screen. Now, this might take longer on your machine, so this is going to be downloaded onto your downloads folder. So our next step is we're going to go to our downloads folder and we're going to install Eclipse from there to our desktop. So it's near finished there now. Now we have a downloaded Eclipse. It's not installed. You just merely have to drag and drop them. So it's a zipped file. Now the easiest way to unzip it, so we can see it here. So it's this guy here. The easiest way to unzip it, now plenty of other Eclipses by the way. The easiest way to unzip it is to double click on it. And we can see this folder inside here. We just catch it and drag it out here. I'm going to put it, so where is it going to be installed? It's going to be installed on my desktop. So I'll put it in there and it brings up that my file is unzipping to the proper location. Okay, so now we can see here we have Eclipse installed. All right, so I'm going to close off this guy. I'm going to close off this guy. Now, still have this folder open here. What is this folder? This is the folder where Python is installed. So I'm just going to keep that open for now. There's a reason why. So we have Eclipse here. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to create a folder where all our Python code is going to be saved. Okay, it's very simple. You can put it in any location. I'm going to put it on the desktop. All right, so I'm going to create a new folder. So I'll go new folder and I'm going to call it Python code. Now that disappears over to another screen here. Okay, so there it is. All right. Now, so this is where all of our Python code is going to be saved. All right. So I now double click in Eclipse. All right. So I now want to run it. So I'll double click on this is the executable that runs Eclipse. So I'm going to double click on it. It brings us up a screen like the following. Okay. Now, so I want the folder where we're going to save. It's on our desktop. I go to browse. I go to the desktop. I know there's one called PYTH Python code. Click on there. Click on select folder. So there it is. Okay. Now you can click on this if you want to, but I wouldn't advise you to. All right. It's no harm to be able to change it every now and again. So you just click on launch. Okay, that brings up the Eclipse IDE. Now this is Eclipse. It doesn't matter that this is what Eclipse looks like the first time you open it. All right, it doesn't matter that it says Eclipse IDE for Java developers. That does not matter. All right, this is just Eclipse. There's an additional piece of software that we need to download that enables Eclipse to create Python projects. All right, so and we need to download this when we're in Eclipse. It's an add-on to Eclipse. All right, so we go to help. We go to Eclipse Marketplace. Now it brings up this screen. Now the software we want to download is called PyDev. Okay, so there it is. It is PyDev, Python IDE for Eclipse. So this is just a piece of software that is integrated into Eclipse. That's all it is. So I click on install. So I don't want PyDev myLane integration. I do not need that. Okay, do not put that in. We don't need that. So it's just PyDev for Eclipse required. Confirm. So it goes along there. I accept the terms of the license agreement. Finish. All right. Now you can see down here in the bottom right hand screen that it's installing the software. You wait until that gets to 100%. Then it says you restart Eclipse, which we will do like so. Restart now. Oh God, we don't want to see that. More bad news about the coronavirus. Whoopee! So if you're watching this in 2021 or 2022, when we have a vaccine, no more coronavirus. Oh God, it would be a great day. Okay, so now PyDev is installed. So we need to create our first Python program. Okay, now when we create our first Python program, we need to link Eclipse up to the interpreter, which we've seen earlier, which is in here, in this location. All right, so very first time you create a Python program, you need to tell it this is the interpreter we're going to use. All right, so we go File, we go New. Now we are going to go Other here. Okay, so we're going to go PYT. Oops. So it's a PyDev project. That is the one we're going to be using. All right, PyDev project. We click on Next. It brings us to this screen. So we go, I'm going to call it First Python. Now, you can see straight away that we've got the red X up here. Project interpreter not specified. So which one are we going to be using? It's going to be this one we're going to be using. Okay, so I go, please configure an interpreter before proceeding. So click on this guy here. And we want to go manual. You don't need to know all these settings. The only settings that we need is we click on choose from list. Okay, choose from list. Click on that guy there. And you can see that it automatically knows here. Now, there is sometimes it does not know that it's in here. Okay, all of these guys. It's in this folder here. Sometimes it does not know. It does not work. I have installed it a good few times now at this stage, and maybe 1 in 4 it doesn't recognize it. So you have to be able to manually browse to where these are. All right. So I have selected them. I click on OK. Okay, so never mind all that stuff. Apply and close. All the settings are then applied, which brings us back to the main project page. Now, however, our first project needs to have something called the source folder. So you go down here, you don't change any settings, you leave everything the way it is. All right. However, this one here, create source folder. This is where we're going. So we're going to be creating a project. It's going to appear on the left of our screen here. And inside that, there's going to be a folder called source. Source is where we're going to put all our Python files. So I click on Finish and open the PyDev perspective. Now, perspectives are just different views. So this is going to be a specific view for Python. So yes, and I'm going to remember my decision. So it'll look like this every time we open Eclipse. And there's our first project has appeared. All right. Now, if I can double click on it, there's our source folder. All right. There's our source folder. There's nothing inside it at the moment. All right. Now, so I right click. I go to new. Now, if you can see here, PyDev module, PyDev package. Now, if they don't appear there, you just click on other. All right. And I want to use the PyDev module. Okay. PyDev module. Click on next. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to ignore package for now. I'm going to give it a name and I'm going to call it source or hello world. Click on finish. Okay. And the template you're going to use is empty. Now there is different templates. We will be covering those later on. Okay. So I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to click on OK. So now we're going to test, is everything working? Okay, so this is officially our first Python program. All right, so type the word print. This is going to print something to our screen. Okay, then we have opening and closing braces. Then I go double quotation marks, hello world. Okay, so I'm going to save that. So I'll go File, Save. Now I'm going to run it. All right, so click on this little icon here, and you run as Python run. Okay, never mind Python unit test yet. That's a more advanced topic which we'll be doing later. So Python run, click on OK. And we can see down here, hello world. So we can see that our first Python program is running. Now I'm going to create a second project. All right, to show you how easy it is the second time around. You don't have to configure anything. So I'll go File, I'll go New. Now, New, PyDev project should appear up here. If it doesn't, you just go to Other, and you'll see PyDev project there. Okay, so File, New, PyDev project. I'm going to call it second project. Now we don't have to bother with any settings down here. We don't have to configure interpreter, whatever, but you have to make sure the create source folder. So I click on finish. That's our second project. I open it up. I go to source. I go here. I go new. I go PyDev module. And I'm going to call it, I just go to here, give it a name. I'm going to call it something called main. Doesn't matter what you call it. I'm going to call it main. Make sure you use the empty template. Click on OK. There's our second program created. So I am going to go down now. Things above it are called comments. All right. So I'm just going to print. I'm going to go, hello there all, and welcome to our second Python project. Okay, so now quick way to save it is Control S. All right, that means our file is now saved and the changes have been saved. Now there's another keystroke you can use. It's Control R. This will run the file. So just click on Python run again as before, and it runs. Now we can see our code has run. So we have created 2 projects, and now we can see that Python is properly installed and our Eclipse is properly installed. Goodbye. Thanks for listening.